Chapter 361. It Will Pay Wages. Once Dominic stepped outside, architect Suni flagged him down for a meeting at the forge. So, how did it go? Did he take a good stock? The architect asked over the ringing of hammers. Presumably, he thought that the noise meant a private conversation, but Dominic had long since realized that dwarves could tune out the sound and make it background noise, so they could talk normally while working. They took 2 full trailers of them, mostly fireplace inserts. I was hoping that they would take a 3rd trailer, but he wasn't comfortable with the large total, as he's never sold any of them before. If they sell out at a good markup, I think we can get 3 or 4 trailers out of the next caravan that passes by. Dominic explained. Oh, that is wonderful news. But if they think that carrying so many valuable goods is too much risk, are we going to be all right in the factory with just 2 trailers per shipment? He asked. Concerned about my profits? Or the workers? Dominic asked in a teasing tone. The workers, naturally. I've made friends with many of them, and everyone is eagerly waiting to see if this is going to make enough money to pay the wages they were promised. He explained. Dominic nodded. The money he had gotten from this shipment, even with the wholesale discount that the merchant had gotten, was enough to buy all the materials and pay the worker wages for 2 months. But they made most of their own materials, or dug them locally. As long as we get more than one of these caravans a month, we should be in good shape to keep the factory running at full output for the foreseeable future. Dominic offered. Suni sighed in relief. That is excellent news. Everyone is quite excited about the wages they're getting and looking forward to their first payday. Dominic laughed. I bet. The first payday is the big one. I told them that I'd pay them weekly, and we've only got a few days to their weekly rest day. I'll make sure everyone is paid at the end of the day on their last shift if you want to warn all the merchants that there will be a flood of celebrating workers. I will spread the good news. Everyone is waiting for someone to come and confirm that a sale has been made. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the guard volunteered to escort them to the edge of the duchy, just to be sure that they were safe. Suni joked. Dominic laughed. You know, we're living nearly at the eastern edge of the duchy, and he's headed that way, right? But it wouldn't hurt to send a few men out that way to make sure that the roads are clear. Keeping the area clear of bandits is every noble's duty, and there aren't any in charge of the border regions at this time. Have you suggested that to the Duchess? Suni asked carefully. Unfortunately not. She is out on a monster hunting expedition today, so I haven't had a chance to suggest that travel into the wilds of the Signia borderlands might be necessary. Suni smiled. So, she did manage to escape. I will let you get back to your business for the day, my lord. You might want to go check on the Adventurers Guild. They have been unloading quite a lot into the convention center. Dominic smiled. That they would be. They had brought all the equipment for the casino with them, as well as their personal belongings and whatever went into the operation of an Adventurers Guild. That would take a lot of time for them to move into the building, and it already had an officers' corps in there that was likely stuck negotiating details and solving issues between their forces as the negotiations went on between the 4 princes at the manor. But that reminded Dominic that he shouldn't leave his guests unattended. All right, I will check on them before I return home. See you later, Pops. Don't work poor Mead too hard. The dwarf laughed and waved, which made Suni realize that the dwarf could hear everything that they said. But Dominic wasn't concerned about Pop's hearing. He would have told him at dinner anyhow. It was important information for the business leaders of the duchy, and Pops would be making new tools if they had to change the plans for the factory. The town was buzzing with excitement as he made his way over to the side of the convention center that would be the offices for the Adventurers Guild, and walked into the middle of chaos. There were dozens of soldiers arranging tables, guild members assembling a counter at the back of the room to register quests, a mage creating a poster board that took up an entire wall. Master Stone, you have guests. Someone called, and the dwarf came out of the back room. Duke Wistover, what brings you by already? I just wanted to make sure that you weren't having any issues getting settled in. But it looks like the officers are being helpful and not giving you a hard time about the process. They had gotten quite used to having the place to themselves, you see. Dominic explained. The dwarven adventurer chuckled. I bribed them. You see, we brought better liquor than what is available in town. There is some good wine here and some decent mead. But you don't have a liquor still at all. Dominic shrugged. Such are the hazards of settling in too fast. Give it a bit of time and we will find someone who can make decent liquor. It's not like we're short on potatoes or corn to make liquor. The dwarf smiled. I did notice that, now that you mention it. Your duchy has bountiful fields everywhere that I look. Are you selling the crops to the merchants? Dominic nodded. As much as they will take. Between that and the factory, we might need to start organizing entire convoys ourselves. The issue is that it's such a long trip anywhere, so we don't have any local caravan operators like they do in the capital. There is no region to serve, no other villages nearby to trade with. Master Stone shrugged. Give it a few years, it will come. Chapter 362. Alexis Outdoors. Princess Alexis stopped as the last of her expanded team entered the woods. She had planned to escape and go hunting with just her royal guard, but she had managed to attract a few royal guards from each of the delegations, as well as a few officers from the armies and a mute hunter who had his tongue cut out at some point in the past and only communicated with the hand signal gestures. Bugbears, 1 kilometer ahead. See the traces. He signaled. Alexis smiled and gestured for everyone else to be silent. Bugbears were somewhat intelligent, surely as intelligent as hobgoblins, and they operated in packs. But they were also capable of making their own weapons. Unfortunately, they were also incredibly aggressive and liked to eat humans. Unlike the trolls, they weren't anything that could be negotiated with. Looking like the uglier cousin of a hobgoblin and a dire bear, they walked upright, but their build wasn't quite right for it, and they were nearly completely covered in fur, except for the wide, flat skulls that always reminded her of a hobgoblin that had been kicked in the face. The team readied rifles and checked their swords, while the 3 royal guards from the prince's teams moved forward with their shields raised. Unlike Alexis's team, they didn't have Magitech rifles. They would fight up close when the battle started, but as much as Alexis wanted a good fight, she knew better than to skip the ranged attacks. If they damaged their gear now, they would have to go home early. The sound of the bugbear camp became clear as they approached, and Alexis called everyone to a halt as she listened to their conversation. She didn't speak bugbear, but the sound of excitement was universal, and they were making plans to do something. There was only one thing that could get them that excited in the area. It had to be the scouting teams that they were targeting. Move forward and engage. She signaled. Moving silently, the team rushed forward, and Alexis raised her rifle to her shoulder. The leader of the tribe was a larger-than-average bugbear, wearing what appeared to be Dago's army uniform pants with bones tied into the fur on his chest. That was her first target, and Alexis stopped running to get a good shot. The crack of her rifle shot was the signal for the other riflemen, and a dozen bugbears fell in a few seconds before the others could react. Arrows raced their way in return as the tribe howled in rage as they charged at the intruders. They had gotten too close by the time that they had a good shot, so the royal guard switched to pistols to get a few more shots off before they changed to sword and shield. The hunter retreated to the back of the team and pulled himself up into a tree so he could shoot over the melee. The tribe was larger than it had looked, and more were appearing by the second. Find where they are coming from, Alexis directed. Got it. They've dug nests underground. Fresh dirt near where they're appearing. Colonel Wilkes called. 10 den holes. The hunter signed, but nobody could see him, and he sighed in frustration. What good was knowing how to communicate silently if nobody could see you doing it? But he could see them from his tree perch, and if he kept shooting, everyone else would figure it out. They wouldn't be in the forest itself, only in the large clearing, where the bugbears didn't have to dig through a web of roots. Their tools tended to be primitive, and solid stone or tangled roots would make it difficult for them to establish a long-term camp. Alexis drew her sword and equipped her shield to move to the front line. A muttered prayer brought glowing golden light to her blade, and she sliced deep into the shoulder of a bugbear that was going for the soldier on her right. Damn, these things are tough. One of the officers complained. Do you not have a proper weapon? Someone shouted back. Shut up. It's a level 5 uncommon blade. It's fine. Alexis laughed as she parried a stone axe. The soldier wasn't wrong. That was a good weapon for an average officer, but not even close to the standard of the gear that the royal guards had. The spell gem on her necklace glowed as Alexis activated, Holy Slash, and cleaved a bugbear in half with a single strike. With the physical enhancement spell gems that everyone had, the advantage the bugbears had in physique was minimal, and they couldn't simply smash the paladins to the ground. Plus, they had to fight through consecrated ground, which was burning their fur and weakening their legs with every step. Push forward. Shield Slam Pattern 3. Alexis ordered. The Royal Guard charged 2 steps forward into the bugbears, slamming shields into the monsters' chests, then slicing low with their blades, under the shields. Unable to defend, a whole row of bugbears were cut down, and the tribe was thrown into chaos as the Royal Guards were given room to spread out and engage. The survivors of the tribe were fleeing now, exiting the burrows to escape the fight. With most of their warriors gone, the tribe should retreat from the town and wouldn't be a threat for some time. But they might have had something on them that would give a hint as to whether they had been gathered by the Dago's aligned mages or whether they were a wild nomadic tribe. Princess, I found it. A communication token and a map. They were definitely brought here and told to stay. Ella called. That was fast. The guardswoman smirked. The first ones we attacked, the ones who were arguing, had it laid out on the ground between them. We trampled it a little, but it's still mostly readable. I will try to clean it up some. Perhaps we can find out who gave it to them and when they were planning to return. That was a big maybe, but it was better than nothing. Chapter 363. Signs of Trouble. Alexis double-tapped a few suspect bodies and moved through the fight to collect the monster cores and any loot from the fallen tribe warriors, while Ella cleaned the map, looking for clues. I don't recognize the cartography style. I don't think that it's a professional, and there's no maker's mark on the map. There are some symbols on it, though. They were brought from the west and traveled down the river. I think that it's safe to say that they were assembled as part of the monster force, but I can't find any sign of when the mages were planning to come back for them. Ella explained. Are there any marks that aren't their camp? Alexis asked. No, it's pretty bare bones. I think that it was only supposed to give them enough guidance to make it to this spot. The hunter came down to inspect the area, and Colonel Wilkes handed him a bag full of monster cores. Your share. He informed the silent man, who smiled eagerly. This was why he had volunteered to come. Not only would the trip increase security for the area, but going with a bunch of royal guards, they would kill a lot of monsters, and he could either use or sell these cores. He lived a simple life, so even a few of them would support him for the year. But improving his spell gem levels a little would help in his daily life. However, if they happened to find another group of monsters, or even 2 of them, he might end up with so many of them that he wouldn't have to worry about how to distribute the wealth. He would have enough for both. A little saved in case he had rough years in the future, and then a few levels into the sharpshooter, trade skill core that he had managed to obtain. That would improve his aim with all sorts of ranged weapons, even without using any extra spells. While the rest of the team checked their gear, in case they had taken damage that they hadn't noticed, the hunter began to scout the area. And what he found was not good. We've got recent activity on the animal trails. It looks like ogres and hobgoblins, bare feet around 60 centimeters for the larger ones. He hurried to explain when he returned. Alexis smiled at the Royal Guard. You hear that, gentlemen? We've got more activity in the area. Let's keep moving. It all needs to be cleared out before we have monsters in the village. This time they were much more careful about their approach, as the tracks they had found were of multiple species, which meant that there could be someone leading them, or it could be multiple groups that both passed by here recently. Fighting one might attract the other, which was nearly as dangerous as having a mage in the group. The royal guards had been trained to deal with mages, and they were paladins themselves, with some defensive magic on top of the basic area barrier that every magic-using soldier would learn. One of the Axebridge royal guards took point, and the rest of the group fell in around the hunter, placing him securely in the middle of their formation. Highness, might I ask why I am in the middle of the formation?
He signed. Bait.
You see, the ogres and any mages they have will assume that our leader will be protected by the formation, which will be the position that you and your hunting rifle will take. We will protect you during a fight, don't worry about that. But it helps reduce the chances that anyone will notice my armor among the other officers here. Alexis whispered back. He understood the concept of bait. He really did. But normally, it was for before you found the enemy, not after. Plus, you didn't usually use your own team members as bait. Still, he had to admit that the man who had taken point was an excellent tracker, and the signals that he was sending back to the unit were quite comprehensive. They continued for nearly 2 hours before they found a group of monsters stopped ahead, hiding in the trees and watching a clearing. Scouting the clearing. Stay. The point man gestured. He seemed to vanish between the trees for a few minutes as everyone waited, afraid to breathe too heavily and give themselves away. The scout reappeared as suddenly as he had vanished, with no sign of his movement, despite being in full plate armor. Injured refugee family. They're using them as bait along an old road. Camped near a burned-out farmhouse. He explained. Everyone waited for Alexis to make a decision. How large is the clearing? Forest ends here. So, it was most likely only the one group of monsters waiting to ambush anyone who came to rescue the travelers. Take them from this side, but be ready for others to come out of hiding when we do. The team spread out through the woods so they could attack from 3 sides of the monster pack and move to surround them if they went for the humans who were stopped along the road. Alexis crept forward, her eyes on the back of a hobgoblin that was facing away from her. A rifle wasn't practical in the woods, so she raised her shield and drew her pistol. The combination felt ridiculous, but she could holster the gun and draw her sword in under a second, while it took longer to get a shield properly braced. Pistol shots rang out in the woods, and Alexis took down her first target with a clean shot to the back of the head. Then another and a third, while the hobgoblin struggled to understand where the attacks were coming from. Then, a whistle from the trees caught her attention, and Alexis turned to the refugee camp. Only they weren't refugees.
Not all of them.
2 men were standing up, and a glowing ritual spell circle was glowing at their feet. They hadn't attacked yet, so Alexis hesitated, not wanting to kill magic users who might be planning to move to town. Then, the spell completed, and a portal opened, revealing an entire field full of hobgoblins and their goblin minions. Chapter 364. Send the cavalry. Artillery. Alexis shouted, alerting her team to the larger threat. 3 of her royal guards broke off from the fight, and Alexis dropped her shield so she could switch to her rifle. Take out the mages. Take out the threat. The sound of her rifle split the air, and a black barrier flashed in front of the mages, who looked shocked and began immediately casting a new spell. A second round caused the barrier to falter, and one of the mages clutched his chest as the bullet hit his personal defenses. He glared at Alexis, who smiled as she fired another round, hitting him in the forehead and causing his body to slowly crumble to the ground with half the head missing. The other mage doubled his efforts, and the portal expanded, letting a flood of hobgoblins out. Then the artillery started. Grenade launchers hurled explosives toward the portal, while the royal guards crossed their fingers for luck, hoping that nothing landed among the wounded refugees. Collateral damage might be inevitable, but they had to get rid of the monsters before they became so large of a threat that even retreat would be impossible. If you have them, back off and use them. We have this. The leader of the Axbridge Royal Guard team instructed, allowing Alexis' team to retreat to join the artillery barrage. The surviving mage frowned as another shot from Alexis slammed into his barriers. It was all he could do to keep them up, and he could already tell that the guardswoman was not rushing her shots. Who had given her a weapon that powerful? Or did she have a spell to boost rifle damage? He had heard that Signia had made rifles that you could socket spell gems into, adding magical damage to the bullets. Alexis had done exactly that, but she wasn't using it yet. Following Dominic's logic, she had added a fireball spell gem to her rifle in case she needed some area damage but didn't want to switch weapons. It was only level 5, far below what she would get from the bullets, but it would still be effective against the monster swarm. A wave of artillery rounds crashed into the monsters, with a few flying through the portal and causing chaos on the other side. That was the last straw for the wounded refugees, and with much screaming and crying, they began to flee. The mages' threats to end them if they didn't behave didn't matter if they were about to die to artillery anyhow. Alexis aimed again and watched the mage stagger back as the bullet slammed into his chest. It didn't look like his barriers were breached, but the Area barrier was long gone, and he was relying on personal defensive magic now. That left all the monsters open to attacks, and more artillery was incoming. From the other side of the portal, mages were driving the army forward, unaware of the threat that they were facing on this side. 10 mortar launchers weren't going to hold the line for long, though. There were far too many monsters coming, and they had only brought a small team to hunt rogue monsters. "Do we set the flare?" Colonel Wilkes shouted as he reloaded his mortar tube. Alexis quickly calculated. They were about 3 hours away for a marching military unit. But if she set the flare, the airships should still see it from Westover. At least, they would know where to look. "Try to take out the mage first. See if the portal closes," she called back. Her next round caught the mage in the stomach as he tried to hide, and Alexis could see the blood flow. Her next shot got the neck, and his head rolled away from his body. But the portal didn't close. The mages on the other side had taken up the spell, and were keeping it open now, which meant that no amount of work from this side would easily close it. All that they could do was put an area barrier over it and try to slow the influx until the mages broke their defenses. It wasn't much, but with so many monsters crowded at the entrance, the mages might not realize what the issue was immediately. Alexis cast the barrier, as it was one of her stronger spells. That paused the flow of monsters for a moment, and Colonel Wilkes sent up a flare. Back in town, the newly installed radios crackled to life. "Your Grace, we have an emergency flare from the hunting group." The device informed Dominic, who was sitting in his office with a Duskblade mage who was tuning it. "Your Grace, I know where they are. Should we send a team?" he asked.
How?
Dominic replied. "We have a communications spell active, and the sect leader relayed the message from the scryers." Dominic nodded. "Can you open a portal?" "Yes, we can." Dominic smiled. "Gather a strike team and a full regiment. I want 1,000 men at that location within 2 minutes." The mage smiled. "I like how you think, Your Grace. I have informed the others." Dominic patted him on the shoulder. "Now, can you open
Me?
a portal to the flare location?" "I'm not waiting for the entire team to be ready." The mage laughed and took out a metal token. It had runes engraved all over it, and when the mage focused mana on it, the portal opened, and Dominic found himself looking down at the battle. "Sorry, Your Grace. I miscalculated." Dominic shrugged. "It's only 5 meters. I'm going." The mage was about to speak, to say that he could move the outlet of the portal, so it was on the ground. But Dominic had already leapt through the portal, landing claws first on the back of an ogre. Sharp claws ripped the magic-resistant monster's throat out, and then Dominic dropped to the ground with a pistol in each hand. Colonel Wilkes smiled. "Princess, I believe that we will be fine. The cavalry is here." "Don't encourage him. The Duke would definitely start doing that from horseback simply for the visual effect, and that is just cruel to the animals." Chapter 365. Intense Focus. Dominic reloaded, and used the empty socket in his pistols to charge Arcane Blast into the reloaded mana rounds. It was an experiment to see if he would get the healing benefits of the skill, without using it directly, and if it didn't work, he would put one pistol away so he could cast and shoot at the same time. The pistols became a droning scream as Dominic fired as fast as he could move his fingers, reloading on the fly so that there were no gaps in his firing rate. Within seconds, it was clearing a circle around himself, and he could actually see what was going on. Someone had opened a portal to a horde of monsters, and they were trying to flood through. Not a big problem. He had more than enough mortars for this situation. The Royal Guards only carried a dozen or so rounds with them, as that was normally more than enough for any reasonable attack that they might launch. But Dominic had hundreds left over that he hadn't needed to distribute. On his right, Alexis pushed forward with her sword and shield ready, while Ella moved to guard his left. "Turn us toward the portal, and I will stop the flow." "How did this happen?" Dominic asked. "Mages hiding among wounded refugees, and a staged ambush." Alexis explained. "That was good enough for him. There will be soldiers here soon. I asked the Duskblade sect to open a portal and send us a regiment. Just hold on for a few minutes, and we will have all the soldiers that we need." The mages of the Duskblade sect should also be able to close the portal. The first group of monsters was finished, and the hunting team was finally able to move forward to contain the monsters. But the flow was too high and they were being pushed back, even with Dominic firing multiple times per second. How does he not run out of mana? Dominic heard one of the soldiers mutter. If it were anyone else, they would have been out long ago. But Dominic's pistols had mana regeneration on hit as a secondary effect, so even if he gave them to someone else, they should be able to keep reloading. It was just the mental stress of constant magic use that would wear a normal person out. Why did you think that they called him the Butcher of Westover? The man is a force of nature in combat. One of the Axbridge soldiers replied. He hadn't understood at first why his country had put zero effort into finding the last of the Wavemates Dragonkin. But now that he saw what happened when one fought back, he was beginning to appreciate the king's mercy. Then, cavalry horns blared and portals opened in the open grassland a few hundred meters from the battle. The army was here, led by a group of flying mages. Lances were leveled, and cavalry on mechanical horse charged toward the monsters, while the mages worked to destabilize and collapse the portal spell that the enemy mages were feeding. The next wave of artillery was fired through the portal, and the monsters stopped coming for a few seconds, giving the army time to get in position, while Alexis' team retreated to catch their breath. Dominic remained at the front, satisfied with the influx of energy that he got from imbuing mana pistol shots with Arcane Blast. But the enemy was not satisfied with the situation, and more portals began to open around the first location. Prince Dominic Wavemates, for your crimes against humanity, you have been sentenced to death. Turn yourself in now, and King Kaizan may have mercy on your soul. Someone on a megaphone shouted from a newly opened portal. Dominic smiled as he turned to face his accuser. Arcane Blast took the man off his horse, missing a large portion of his chest. War horns blared, and Dominic laughed as Dago's cavalry rushed out to meet the combined arms regiment sent to rescue Princess Alexis and her team. Highness, I believe that this should be called solid evidence of Prince Kaizan's involvement in the monster attacks. We have Magitech cameras recording everything, including their declaration against Dominic. A cavalry officer from the rescue force announced. You brought cameras? Alexis asked, confused. In case there were tensions between the forces. We grabbed whoever was equipped when the mages arrived, so we have soldiers from 3 different nations here. He elaborated. That made sense. Nobody wanted accusations based on hearsay to cause trouble between the forces when there were negotiations ongoing. Should we rescue the Duke? Ella asked. Alexis shook her head. If I'm not mistaken, he's about to start using mortars as hand grenades, and we don't want to be standing anywhere near him when he does. Yes, there they were. He was throwing them through the portal with one hand as he shot with the other. Even the mages of the Duskblade sect were backing away from his insane area attacks. Instead, they focused on the other portals and the waves of monsters that were coming through them. Sect Master, where do these portals lead? Alexis shouted, ensuring that they gathered as much knowledge on camera as possible. The portals with monsters are coming from somewhere west of here, the uninhabited lands near the Axbridge border, while the ones with soldiers open in northern Dagos, near Wesselby. A mage shouted back. That would be valuable information for the princes who were discussing the current state of the Dagos civil war and its implications. Don't let any of our men go through those portals. Fire spells and mortars if you need, but do not send anyone to the other side. She instructed. Understood, Highness. Are we sure that the Duke is a blacksmith? If I had to hazard a guess, I would think that he was a berserker. The cavalry officer noted, gesturing with his chin toward where Dominic was fighting. The enmity with Dagos is deeply personal to him. Just make sure that he doesn't get flanked and let him fight. Alexis ordered. Shouldn't we pull him back to the healers? Alexis shook her head. There are no mages in the Dagos force and no guns. Most of them aren't even getting close enough to hit him. He will retreat when he is injured. He likely wouldn't, but she had seen him heal major injuries with Arcane Blast, and one man loose in their ranks was much less likely to lead to friendly casualties than sending infantry to support him. Chapter 366, Lift the Fog of War. Dominic blinked and looked around the battlefield, a fog slowly lifting from his mind. There were no more Dagos soldiers, and the portal had closed, leaving him nothing to fight. He was covered in blood, The fingers of one hand were burning from the heat given off by his mana revolver, and the fingers of the other were raw from throwing rough surface mortars. The number of bodies said that it must have been a glorious battle, but his only memories of it were vague. His claws were out, and he could feel his fangs extended. Not a good sign, but nobody was standing near him, so he could hope that nobody noticed he went a little feral during the battle. That was the exact opposite of the truth. Everyone had noticed that he went a bit feral during the battle. He had even killed the soldiers who tried to surrender if they couldn't get to another Signia unit fast enough. Feeling better? Alexis asked, as Dominic straightened his clothes and tried to retract his fangs. Much, thank you. He replied with a slight lisp as his fangs slowly returned to normal size. 100 riflemen nearly wasn't enough today. We're going to have to work on equipping the forces stationed at Westover, in case Dagos attacks us directly. Alexis informed him. Dominic sighed. You have a point. I see a lot of bullet holes in the dead, but not nearly as many as I would expect. We had to send too many men into close combat, when it would be safer to fight from a distance. It's a never-ending cycle. Just wait until you've been at it for a decade and soldiers start to retire, so you have to keep training new ones to replace them every year. Colonel Wilkes joked. Dominic smirked at him. At least I won't have to make them new rifles. I can just give them the ones that the retirees don't need anymore. The colonel smiled behind his visor. That also wasn't true. A decade of hard use was about all that even the best rifles could hope for. So, most of the weapons would be decommissioned along with the soldiers using them. Whether they got to keep them or not was a different matter, but after that long in service, even a full rebuild might not be enough to save the weapons. Not if they kept up the pace they were firing them at these days. Do we have any prisoners who can give us information on the false prince's actions? Dominic asked as he surveyed the damage. Indeed, Your Grace. The officers managed to save a few of them from your wrath, and they seem most eager to answer questions about the situation within Dagos. One of the royal guards replied. Well, that is quite kindly of them. Were they informed that we're not adverse to them resisting? The royal guard laughed, while many of the surrounding officers shook their heads in dismay. Yes, my lord. They are well aware. I believe that your enthusiasm for them to resist might have been a significant factor in their decision not to. Dominic shrugged, and Alexis smacked him on the back of the head. They're already cooperating. You don't need to terrify them any more than they already are. But we need to get back to town so that we can relay this information to the appropriate people. If Kaizan is sending troops to open portals on our territory, we're going to have to start taking aggressive action to stop him. The portals back to town were still open, and Dominic led the way, allowing the troops to take care of battlefield cleanup, evidence collection, and the distribution of monster cores. He knew that very few of those would belong to him this time, as he had been targeting Dagos soldiers, while most of the army was fighting a goblin horde and their hobgoblin leaders. He wasn't short on money. There was no need to be greedy. The generals assigned to the military units waiting around Westover all rushed to see him the moment that Dominic exited the portal, so he motioned for them to wait while the rest arrived. I will tell you all that I know, but I showed up late as well. Dominic began. What we know is that the hunting team led by Princess Alexis encountered a group of monsters using wounded refugees as bait. The team engaged and multiple mages revealed themselves from the refugee position. Those mages opened portals to bring through a horde of goblins and hobgoblins. That was when the flare was sent up and when I arrived. After some time, the situation began to turn in our favor, but new portals were opened, revealing more goblins, as well as a detachment of Dagos army soldiers working in league with the monsters. Those soldiers identified themselves as loyal to Prince Kaizan, who claims the throne of Dagos. Prisoners were taken after our victory, but interrogation is ongoing. I don't know of any casualties among the higher ranks, but medical treatment and casualty counts are ongoing. He finished once the generals were present. So, the Dagos army dared to send soldiers here? Despite the treaties? One of the generals asked. I don't believe that they were Dagos army regulars. It seems more likely that they were rebels, part of the group seeking to overthrow the rightful king. But the interrogations are ongoing. The officers nodded in understanding. Dominic wasn't going to make a positive statement until they were absolutely certain of the situation, and that it wasn't some sort of setup to try to turn them against one side or the other. Many forces had an interest in seeing Dagos either become stable again or collapse entirely, and none of them wanted to be the scapegoat that made it possible. "What is delaying the rest of the team?" one of the generals asked. "Battlefield cleanup, of course. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands, of goblin cores to collect and possible refugees to treat before they start to return. We can't be asking them to leave empty-handed after all." The cores would naturally belong to military command, as they were obtained during a military deployment. But with 3 nations' worth of soldiers, it didn't take long to realize that could be an issue all by itself. Chapter 367. Someone should tell him. "So, are we going to address the rampaging feral dragon in the room or not?" one of the Axbridge generals asked once Dominic was gone to inform the others of the situation. "Nope," Colonel Wilkes replied calmly. "Seriously, I don't think that he knows. Someone needs to tell him." "Don't you dare." Look how happy he was when he realized there were no more Dagos soldiers to fight. Wilkes countered. He ripped a man's head off with his bare hands when he ran out of mortars. Wilkes shrugged. "Messy, but effective. I seem to recall you cutting a hobgoblin's head off while it was standing over you." The general smiled, then wrinkled his nose at the smell of goblin blood. I used to think that the whole Butcher of Westover thing was just a propaganda joke. But something definitely set him off in the middle of the battle. During the first half, he seemed quite rational." The general noted. Alexis stopped Wilkes from answering. "It's a state secret. Rest assured, we have it under control, and he's not completely feral." He still remembered who was on his team. A squeaky voice joined the conversation from the ground nearby. But he didn't even accept surrender from the mortally wounded. "That dragonkin is a psychopath. A menace to society. And the Duke of Westover, one of the most distinguished militant noblemen in Signia." Colonel Wilkes informed the prisoner. "We are at least merciful enough to not let him be in charge of the interrogations. I have heard a few things about his methods." The Axbridge general threatened. The prisoner cowered on the ground, shaking and muttering to himself. Alexis frowned in annoyance. She didn't know what that man had seen, but just the mention of Dominic interrogating him had been enough to make him soil himself again. "How is the collection coming?" she asked, changing the topic. "We have the bodies of the dead soldiers and mages as evidence, and the bodies of the monsters are 3/4 looted. As a courtesy, only monster cores are to be turned in today. All item drops will go to the team member who collected them, even rare quality items, should any drop." Colonel Wilkes noted. That wasn't likely to be a significant loss to the military coffers, but it would go a long way toward improving morale among the armies. A few of the officers wanted to complain, as policy said that the enlisted men shouldn't have rare quality items. But they could just pay the men for them once they were back in camp, and let the soldiers enjoy the windfall. By the time that everything was collected and sorted, with the monster cores spread between the leaders of the forces, it was getting close to dinner time, and Alexis was certain that her brothers would be impatiently waiting for her to return. Dominic was there with them, but if her guess were right, his answers would be vague, as he only remembered parts of the battle, and his version of a battle report was lacking to begin with. He wasn't trained to give the exact details that they wanted, so they would have to coax him through it, and that would frustrate both princes to no end. The same as every other time they had to get a report from a non-military noble. What Alexis found when she entered the manor was not at all what she was expecting. Instead of a bunch of frustrated princes trying to get the right answers out of a duke who didn't understand how the proper royal formatting for a report worked, she found them gathered in the front living room, glasses of rum punch in hand, retelling war stories that had nothing at all to do with the battle today. The look on his face when he saw that it was the Natural Sons Regiment with a bunch of grenade launchers. Priceless. Dominic laughed as she entered the room. Then he waved her over. "And now our final celebrant is here. Princess, would you like a rum punch? Or perhaps something non-alcoholic?" Alexis frowned at him. "Did you put off the official report until I got here?" Dominic did his best to look wounded, placing his hands over his heart and nearly spilling his drink. "Of course not. We delegated the report writing to the Royal Guard members who were at the scene, and everyone agreed that we can go over it tomorrow, once there has been plenty of time for them to ensure they didn't miss any details. He insisted. Prince Fahad winked at her, and Alexis immediately knew what had happened. They had no expectations that Dominic would give them a proper report, so they had just left it to the professionals and had gotten the old soldier's tale version of it from him. Prince Russell handed her a large glass of what looked like fruit juice, but smelled strongly of sweet rum, and Alexis smiled at the prince. In that case, why don't I regale you with a most interesting tale from a new point of view? You see, my version of the story doesn't start with a madman leaping through a portal before its destination had settled and clawing an ogre's throat out from the back. It starts with a much more casual trip through the woods and the ambush of a pack of bugbears. She began. Never did understand how they got that name. Prince Fahad replied. They walk upright and certainly don't look like a bear, save for the fact they're hairy. Alexis laughed and sipped her drink. You have a point there. But calling them furry orcs seems insulting to the orcs somehow. That made Dominic laugh. Compared to bugbears, orcs are positively reasonable. I've met with tribes of them wandering the desert in Axbridge. Dangerous, but not feral. We will get to that crazy story later. First off, I would like to say that I am nominating the Duke for the task of getting his gunsmithing forge back online. We need a lot more rifles, and not for resale. A full unit of riflemen will be added to our local military forces, and once those are equipped, I will have him make more for the officers of the visiting regiments. Alexis insisted. I was afraid you'd say that. Chapter 368. Knowing the right people. The royals drank late into the night, and eventually needed the maids to help them back to their own bedrooms in the outlying courtyards. Dominic had suggested that they just stay in the guest rooms here in the manor, but when the officers came looking for them in the morning, there would be panic if they weren't in their own rooms. Plus, they would wake everyone in the house up, searching for their princes. Not that Dominic got to sleep in, even with them gone. The veiled maids came to rouse him right at dawn, and the smell of cooking breakfast kept him from going back to sleep. There was just something about the smell of frying eggs that resonated with his brain and told him that sleep time was over. Pops, Mead, and Guild Master Stone of the Adventurers Guild were already at the table when he arrived, but they were the first. Oh, the full smithy team is here now. Good morning, Lord Dominic. Stone greeted him as Dominic flopped into his chair. Good morning, Guild Master. How is the establishment of the new house going? The dwarf smiled. Quite well, thank you. We're up nearly 20,000 gold coins after last night's festivities. But I suspect that will change quickly. Either the officers are going to run out of money or get on a hot streak and start winning some back. Dominic chuckled, and Mead giggled at some memory. Perhaps you should put up a sign warning them that if they're not good gamblers, they should remain upstairs? The merchant caravan boss was quite pleased with the extra couple of hundred he won. They'll be leaving in the next few minutes. They were all finished with repairs just after midnight, and they were already awake when we left the forge this morning. But there is another caravan coming today, headed west this time, so I don't know how much they'll buy. But I hear that they might load up with food and turn around for Castle City. They're paying better than Limpsbury is, and nobody thinks that a load of fresh produce will make it all the way to Kynwyn from here. Kynwyn is having issues? Dominic asked curiously. Mead and Stone both nodded, and the apprentice Smith motioned for the guild master to speak. The Dago's army has stripped the city bare to feed the troops. They're right on the river, so they've had enough irrigation that they didn't have to worry about the drought. But what they have has been going to the soldiers, and they're rationing everything that's left. We had a chat with the merchant last night, and from the sound of it, most caravans have been avoiding the region entirely. Only the local merchants out of Kynwyn are servicing the area, so they're not getting the imports they need. But there are reports of rebels in the area, and that's worse for business than bandits. Bandits will steal your money and valuable goods, perhaps kill some of your men. However, the rebels will self-righteously take everything from your wagons to your life, drafting you into their force. Stone explained. Well, that does explain why so many of the merchants have stopped servicing Dagos entirely. It's a bit of a shame that they couldn't sort their mess out. The new king seemed like a half-decent sort. But that's only our problem if the rebels are going to keep causing trouble here. Did the merchant say how large the convoy coming this way today was going to be? Dominic asked. The dwarf shook his head. No, he just mentioned a caravan coming this way. From the sound of things, they want to increase the travel along this route, moving from Old Signia to Stantia province. Everyone is trying to recover from the war, and there are shortages of everything. Dominic nodded. So I'm told. I will have the staff alert me when the caravan arrives, but I'll be in the new forge for the rest of the day. I've got entirely too many rifles to make, and the matter has become suddenly urgent now that we know the mages aren't simply hiding in the wilderness, but using portals to actively target the region. Guild Master Stone frowned. Do you think that Skipple will get pulled into the mess? I heard from some of the other branches that things are getting spicy there, with their largest mage academy completely closed, and all remaining students sent home for the semester. Oh, that I didn't know. We were wondering if the academy had gone completely rogue and thrown in with Prince Kaizan. Their acolytes and elders have been found with multiple monster hordes in the past, and might have been involved in yesterday's attack. I didn't stick around for the cleanup and investigation, so I don't have the details yet. But there were multiple mages killed in the attack. Dominic explained. He paused for a second, then rummaged through his storage cube for a pen and paper. I will put out a bounty for information with the Adventurers Guild. 10 gold coins for verifiable information proving that a monster group was moved into the region. We will also pay the ear bounty for goblins, hobgoblins, and ogres. We've seen all of them in the area recently, along with a pack of bugbears. But those are unlikely to be around in large numbers. Unlike the goblins, which seem to be everywhere lately. Dominic sighed. Master Stone laughed. It only seems like that to you, because you were in the Axbridge Desert until last year. It's practically the only spot on the continent other than the high mountains that isn't overrun with the filthy things. The reproduction rate of the goblin horde is keeping half my guild employed, while the other half sees themselves as above hunting such low bounty threats. That brings up another point I've been delaying. Do you have master-ranked adventurers among the members who are here? We're still short on trade skill cores for the town guard. The generals have been working on them, but they take time to make, and the generals are all old men. He asked. Guild Master Stone smiled. I just might be able to help you with that. You see, the Adventurers Guild keeps them in stock and in multiple options. You never know what fighting style a new adventurer prospect will want to try, and starting out with a small debt and some gratitude to the guild is the best way to keep them coming back. Chapter 369. Effectiveness and Value. Hearing Master Stone say that the Adventurers Guild had skill cores in stock for the combat classes set Dominic's mind at ease. Given some time, they would be able to get a well-rounded force, including all of the essential warrior-type classes and mages from the Duskblade sect. The Purity sect might also build their numbers now that they were in town, but from what Dominic could tell, their specialties were much better suited to construction and domestic magic. They were not trained fighters like the Duskblade sect, and there weren't enough of them to run the school on their own. Besides, Alexis had stolen all their women for her veiled maid's force. Being so early to breakfast had advantages, and Dominic was ready to head to the forge before anyone else was up and about, except the staff and the dwarves. That might have a lot to do with the fact they were drinking until the early hours of the morning, but it gave him time to play with the goats on his way out to the forge. The curious animals stationed themselves at the door as he started the fire and let the forge warm up while he gathered all his materials. It looked like he had enough for another week or two, but there was a load of clay in the corner, ready for him to work it into steel. Now that he had worked his spellbook up to a suitable level, clay to steel would make proper tool steel for the rifles. Not by much, as he was still just short of level 14, but the average soldier wouldn't question the quality of the alloy that he could turn out now. Using magic to form the parts also saved a significant amount of time, as he could just stamp it in a mold and then clean up the surfaces. Drying the clay and shaping it would probably be faster if he had a spell to dry clay. But Dominic was happy with the setup, as he already had jigs made for everything from when he was working with raw blocks of metal in the Royal Forge. Once everything was in place, he began moving clay to a screen to remove impurities, then into a wheelbarrow, where he mixed in water to get it to a workable consistency. After that, He filled all his molds and gave them a good shake to settle out any air bubbles that hadn't been forced out by the pressure. Every so often, he would get a defective part still, but those were just tossed into the scrap pile to be smelted down into the small parts or brazing rods to do repairs. It wasn't perfect, and he did hate to waste material, but there was always a good use for steel bars. The goats continued to watch from the door and graze in the field outside as Dominic worked. The noise didn't bother them, and they were enjoying watching the horned one smashing things. The improvements that Dominic had made to the last pair of rifles that he made were going to be implemented into the new rifles, which meant that they would need some magical skill to use them. But it was clear to him that would no longer be an issue here, and that the real consideration was balancing the difficulty to make them against the effectiveness and the likelihood that they would mysteriously vanish if weapons too valuable made their way into the hands of someone sketchy. It wasn't unheard of for someone thinking of leaving a guard force before their time was up to simply sell all their gear to a black market dealer and vanish. That balance circulated through his mind as Dominic examined the parts for the first batch of 10 rifles. All that was left was the Magitech circuitry to charge the pressure tank, and he would be ready for assembly, which left him little time to decide, as any additional enchantments would have to be factored in now, when the rifle was still open and able to have an extra Magitech circuit added. No, he would leave them just the way he made the last ones, with the option for manual loading or use as a mana rifle, using the mana revolver circuitry and enchantments. The only change that he did make was to add a pair of notches in the top of the receiver so that a techno-wizard could fit the rifles with a scope without modifying the rifle itself. That level of precision grinding of optical devices was not something that Dominic knew how to do, but surely someone in town would. And it might be a popular add-on for sharpshooters and huntsmen. One of the maids brought out lunch, and Dominic snacked as he finished the assembly, then began to prepare the oil bath to finalize the enchantments. But first, one final check, to ensure that the mechanical parts were properly functional and that the barrel didn't have any interior deformities. With that finished, Dominic poured out a fresh dose of mana oil into the tube he used for dunking rifles, and then selected a level 6 hobgoblin core to grind into it. Once the first rifle was properly hot over the forge, Dominic dropped it in the tube and waited for the bubbling of boiling oil to stop before pulling it out and attaching the copper stock pieces he had made to replace the wooden ones that took too long. Copper was easy to work, only a few minutes with the hammer and a form to pound them into just the right shape, far superior to the time needed for even a half-decent wooden stock. There was only one issue with this design. If you fired it steadily, the forestock would heat up. So, you had to wear gloves, wrap the rifle with cloth, or risk burning your hands. Not a perfect replacement for the wooden version, but the soldiers could swap them if they wanted. The carpenters knew how to make replacements, and they weren't expensive. Chapter 370, New Intel. Dominic repeated the process in the afternoon, finishing the day with his usual quota of 20 completed rifles. That brought him back to the house just after the princes had finished with their daily meetings, and from the looks on their faces, the answers weren't ones that Dominic was going to want to hear. "Anything that I should know before I start eating?" he asked curiously. "You've got both blood and what looks like gear oil under your fingernails." Prince Fahad joked. "Soot from the forge, too." Dominic agreed. The other two men smiled while the less serious pair joked about current events, but Prince Claudius wasn't going to wait while they got distracted. "We got an official communication from the king earlier today. Westover is not the only region that has seen a proliferation of monsters recently. The majority of Dagos is under siege, the same way that Signia City was at the start of the war, and King Gustav has requested assistance from his allies. Assuming that he actually has any left. Schiphol is in a similar situation, with their academy shut down and the capital under siege by monsters, who we have confirmed are being led by rebel mages. However, we learned today that it is not just the Schiphol Royal Academy that is involved. You found evidence of them here earlier, and one of the dead mages yesterday was as well. But we have reason to believe that at least one of the others was actually from Shersdonia, to the west of Axbridge. Whether he was a mercenary or a migrant is not something we have confirmed yet, as there were no survivors from the monster invasion side of the battle. However, that does lead us to believe that the reports of Prince Kaizan offering portions of Dagos and hereditary titles to those willing to assist him are most likely true. Dominic sighed. If I just killed him from the start, this would have been so much easier. Hindsight is 2020. However, the royal mages have confirmed that the version of him who was insignia for the ceremony was a body double. The timeline overlaps with events in Dagos, where he was confirmed to be in attendance and planning attacks. It no longer seems plausible that he was actually insignia, and that his lack of real danger was the reason that he dared to make such provocative comments. Claudius explained, if we killed his double, he could claim that Signia intended to kill an emissary. If we didn't, he could claim that we were too cowardly to act when he provoked us. Dominic realized. Exactly, it is a win either way for his propaganda efforts and his attempts to prove to potential allies that he has a real chance. Now, Dagos is in rough shape all around, but he controls the most prosperous region and a large portion of the population. Not the majority, or anything close to it. But there are over 1 million people in the region that is currently controlled by the rebels. They also have a significant portion of the coastline, and Signia sunk most of the Dagos navy during the war, so the king doesn't have the fleet to invade them by sea. Claudius continued. Dominic sighed. So, half the reason that things are such a mess in Dagos is that we started the invasion from the closest side, instead of the side controlled by the largest pain in our collective backside? Prince Claudius looked unimpressed, but Prince Russell simply shrugged. He's not wrong. If we had focused on going after Kaizen, instead of taking out the strategic points that would cause the country to collapse, we wouldn't be in this situation now. The only issue with that is, we would have lost many more soldiers trying to do it that way, and we would probably have a very different situation at home. Prince Fahad nodded. Signia's assault was considered a brilliant tactical strategy when it was executed. The current situation is down to Dagos, and to some extent Skipple. How much of this is due to the interference of Skipple and its mages is what we're currently investigating. But it appears to be significant. Is there anything that we can do, other than keeping soldiers on standby and sending out teams to cull the monster population so it can't be used to besiege the village? Dominic asked. Not at this time. But your vision is too small. The monsters hidden in the wilderness of Stantia province and the rural areas of Axbridge won't just be used against Westover. They are being spread all over Dagos and Skipple right now. Prince Claudius added. Well, I don't know what anyone will do about Axbridge. That's too much territory with too few civilized residents. But we can certainly start sending men out all over the duchy. Are the Signia soldiers still stationed in the 3 cities of Stantia province? Dominic asked. Yes, and they're being reinforced now for the same purpose. Monster hunting. A new force has been sent to Albrols as well. Signia might be reluctant to assist, but they're not going to let Prince Kaizen and his allies take control of Dagos. Prince Fahad nodded in agreement with the Signia Crown Prince's assessment. It's not official yet, but we do consider the armistice to have been violated. However, the King of Signia doesn't consider the government of Dagos to be the enemy anymore, only the rebel forces. Princess Alexis and Prince George of Mitfield are currently in the office, sending messages to Mitfield so that they are prepared, in case the troubles spread in their direction. I don't believe that they would be a priority target for attack, but the monsters might migrate into their territory. Dominic sighed. And so, the entire region has been pulled into the mess, but none of us know where to look, and we won't until we manage to catch one of the mages alive. Prince Fahad nodded. And taking them alive is nearly impossible because they will simply self-destruct 9 times out of 10. Dead men tell no tales, and whether they know it or not, they are dead men the moment that they are captured.